On March 25th, 1957, the NBA modified its free throw rules, changing the game to be more modern than we see today. With players getting larger, they needed to make it a fairer game by changing the width of the free throw lane, as well as adding the bonus for free throws, giving you 2 shots, due to the impact of legends like Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. And these rules are the basis of what we have today, and made the game what we know and love, and changed it from a struggling league into one of the most profitable in the world. Today we're going to dive into what happened with the free throw rules on Daily Sports History.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide as you daily learn more about sports history as we dive into free throw rules. And today's trivia question to listen out for is, what NBA player led the NBA to widen the free throw lane again to 16 feet, what it is today? Listen throughout the episode to hear the answer. And if you miss it, I will give it to you at the very end. Now, before 1957, basketball was dominated under the basket. There was no three-point line. It was about having players that were big. They found out that having taller players meant you could dominate with players like George Mikan, because they could win the rebound battle, and it was much easier for them to score. As in 1950, Mikan led the league multiple times, averaging almost 30 points a game. And Mikan had huge influences on the game and the rules that we know today. Because of him, we have the goaltending rule and widening the lane to curb some of the dominance he had in the game. And before 1954, when they introduced the shot clock, which we covered in a previous episode, the pace of games was much, much slower. And teams often focused on defense and physical play, as games were regularly scored in the 60s and 80s, making scoring much more limited. But also shows how dominant George Mikan's 30 points a game were. So why did we need this change? Because it was an imbalanced game. Back then, having a guy that was 6'9", almost 7 foot, was much rare than today. Today we have 7-footers that are great in college and can't even play in the NBA. But back then, if you were tall, you could dominate, and the lanes were a lot shorter, so it was much less area you had to cover to have success in the post. And the league was getting complaints over the physical play under the basket and the slow pace that this caused, as teams with these taller players had an unfair advantage. And they wanted to equalize the teams, allowing for other teams besides the Lakers to win championships. So one rule they instituted was widening the free throw line from 6 feet to 12 feet. Now this is width, not length. This is where the players stand when they're on defense waiting to rebound the ball. And by widening this lane, doubling the amount that big men could have control in the paint. And with the new free throw rules, they also introduced 2 spaces closest to the end line that would be occupied by the opponent of the free throw shooter. This helped give them a better option to get a rebound following a missed free throw, making it more challenge for, again, a big man to dominate. But why did they enforce this rule? Well, it wasn't the first time it's been done. They actually did it in college back in 1951 after George Mikan dominated the college game. And so they followed suit. It often happens in basketball where college or another pro league, like the ABA, had the three-point line and the NBA didn't. But when they adopted the ABA, they got the three-point line. So a lot of times these changes come from outside where they're tested and they see the merit in them, and the NBA adopts them. It's a slow league, but they do have their eye open to what's going on. This also made it easier for players that weren't pushing 7 feet tall to have success while playing the game. Because if you allow a player to just use their height, it makes it a lot easier. And this also required teams to adjust how they played, especially if you had great big men, which was going to be a focus in the 1960s, the decade that was coming, where Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain dominated the league as big men, but also did it using these new rules. But guards were the main benefactor, as they could get into the lane easier and have more success by these centers and power forwards being pushed out of the lane, allowing more access to shorter players. Now, this rule had an immediate impact on the scoring patterns. Players were accustomed to dominating near the basket, and now players had to become more balanced and learn how to shoot away from the basket more to allow less dominance on the big men. Also led to the game being easier to watch as players were more spread out and allowed you to see what was actually happening instead of players all bunched together. But this wasn't the only time they would widen it, as again, another dominant big man in Wilt Chamberlain would force them to widen it to 16 feet. And Wilt Chamberlain had multiple rules that were adjusted because of him. He was so dominant, just like George Mikan the decade before. These two dominant big men, in George Mikan and Wilt Chamberlain, literally changed the NBA into what it is today. They showed how dominant a big man could be, and imagine how some of these players today, like Wemby, who is 7'4", would dominate with a 6-foot paint. It would be insane. These were rules that were implemented as we learned how dominant players would get and how big players would get. And it really shifted the focus on offensive strategy, allowing for more strategy. The strategy used to be throw it to the tall guy, he's going to score, and we'll figure out everything else. Now they had to figure out how to run an offense. This also reduced the physicality under the basket, which made faster play and helped players not get injured as much. But despite these rule changes, centers still dominated. Bill Russell came in shortly after they were expanded to 12 feet and still dominated and helped lead the Celtics to a dynasty in the 1960s. And Wilt Chamberlain still averaged over 50 points in his 1961 season, showing that despite these changes, dominant players were still going to win. And through time, it definitely showed that this was a change that was effective. As from the 1950s, the average points scored in the game was around 100, and that was increased by 10 points, almost 10% in the 1960s. This also reduced the amount of fouls that were shot in the game, allowing for more gameplay to be done because of the widening of the lane, because there weren't so many players bundled up under the basket. The NBA has continued to change. If these rules weren't established early in the NBA's infancy, they never would have had a chance to continue to grow. We saw how much introducing the shot clock was on a previous episode, how important that was to the game, and likely saved the NBA. But the rules like the free throw lane also changed it forever. If you ever watch old clips, you see how thin the lane is, and those courts just look goofy today. But now we found a balance that has allowed the game to continue to grow and showed that they're willing to make drastic efforts to allow the game to grow and are focused on fans loving the game. As there was not TV rights back then, you only made money if players came to the game to watch your team play. And that's what their focus was early in the NBA. And it helped adapt, and it allowed us to get to where we are today in the modern NBA. And what do you think was the best rule change in NBA history? Thank you for listening to today's Daily Sports History. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please make sure you follow and subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss a single Daily Sports History. And come back tomorrow for more Daily Sports History. And did you catch today's trivia question? Who was the NBA player that led the NBA to change the width of the free throw lane again from 12 feet to 16, what it is today? The answer is the great Wilt Chamberlain was so dominant that they widened the free throw lane again to 16 feet, where it has stayed ever since.